Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. This is part 4 of our 3D Elf Run series which we're making on Scratch 3. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Just finished coding.
Now I have to interject here that if you've not watched parts 1 to 3, please watch them before you come here because as you can see, I'm picking up from where I left off, and for this video to make sense, you need to have watched the previous ones. I will leave a card for you right here. Please watch the videos and then come right back. If you're still here, I'm going to assume that you've watched parts 1, 2 and 3, in which case you should have the background, the cars and the player movement completely set up. And in this video what I will do is I will fix up the car layering issue. And if you noticed what happened there in the screen carefully, you would have seen that the cars kind of were messed up. The cars which were at the back were showing at the front instead of being the other way around. So let's get right into it. So now you can head over to obstacles, and here you can set up a new variable called found and C. Okay, so just have it like this, found and a C. And the C stands for counter, and you'll start to understand what found stands for in just a minute. So once you have this in place, now you can get into when I start as a clone, and here we're going to have 3 different lists. Okay, so one is going to be lane 1, or one is going to be lane 0, and one is going to be lane -1. And you can actually set this for all sprites because it's going to be pretty problematic if each sprite had a different list. So let's have it this way. So lane -1, I'll start with that. Then we will have lane 0, and then we will have finally lane 1. So there we go. This was fairly simple to set up, and we can hide all of these 3 things after this. And what I'm going to do is actually, before we even get into that when I start as a clone, I'll be going to the inits and I will be having a repeat 5 here. So repeat 5, and each one of those 5 times what I will do is I will add, and you can head over to variables and grab this block which says add thing to lane whatever, and you can just type in a space here. So there's a space within this blank, and we're adding 5 spaces to lane 1, we're adding 5 spaces to lane 0, and we're also adding 5 spaces to lane 1. So the underlying assumption that I'm making to fix up the layering is that there can never be more than 5 cars on a particular lane. So I know that the exposition is quite far away, it's all the way at -400, but this assumption works pretty much all the time. So what I will do is I will say if there is a car already, then I will add it to the first item of this lane -1. But if lane -1 is already occupied by a car, and by lane -1 I'm talking about the first item here, then I will go look at the second item, and that way I have the layering set up so that I know if I'm in lane -1, my layering is set up perfectly relative to that particular number which I am on lane -1. And I know that may not have made perfect sense here, but you will start to get this clearly. So now we can get back to this when I start as a clone tab, and here is what you need to do. So first we can set the sound variable, the found variable to no. And after this we have 3 different conditions. So we can grab an if then and 3 different times. Okay. So first, if the lane is equal to 1, then we do certain things. If the lane is equal to 0, then we do certain things. And finally, if the lane is equal to -1, then we do a completely different thing. So what I will do is I will create 3 different blocks. Okay, so we have lane, I'll just call it lane -1 like this. And you can actually run this without a screen refresh since we don't have any movements that we are going to do. So I will do it like this. Then I will create a new block called lane 0. And once again, we can run without a screen refresh. And then I will create another block called lane 1. Again, run without screen refresh, and there we go. So you can drop all of these things in their respective, if then lanes. So within if lane is equal to 1, I will put lane 1 within that, and so on. So first let's get into lane -1. So lane -1 is going to be the lane on the extreme right, and that means the cars there need to be shown first. But it's important to note that the car is always going to be in front of the player, and we also need to leave some space for the player between the lanes. So my simple idea was I leave the first layer always vacant, just so that when we have a go to front layer, that all the other layers don't get disrupted. Then I have the second layer open for the player. The third to seventh layer would be lane 1 of the cars. The eighth layer is going to be vacant for the player to come in, so that if he's on the second lane, he's in front of the cars on lane 1. Then lane 9 to 13 is going to be filled with cars on lane 2. And lane 14 is as usual going to be vacant, so that in case my player is on lane 1, then he is in front of all the cars that are on lane 0. And finally, lane 15 to lane 19 is going to be filled with layer 15 to layer 19 is going to be filled with cars which are on lane 1. So that is going to be the general idea that I will be going with. So I'll have within this defined lane 1, I will have a simple repeat until. So we will say repeat until, and first actually you need to make sure that you set C to 1. So just like this, and within this repeat until I will have an OR condition. So I will repeat until either C is equal to 5, in which case we have pretty much gone through this list, or I will repeat until item C of that, and this will take me a second to type in, so just hold on. So item C of lane -1, so it's going to be this corresponding lane. So you can grab the C variable and put it in like this, and item C is equal to the space. So if this is the case, then I want to make sure I get out of this loop, which is why we have a repeat until. And I just realized I made a small mistake, and you don't need it this way. So you need to have this as if found is equal to yes, and this is very important, because if you did what I just did, which is the mistake I made when I first was trying to improvise the code, and I got it completely wrong. So you need to have until found is equal to yes, and you also need to make sure you set C to 0, because we're going to increment at the beginning of the loop rather than at the end of the loop, and this plays a huge role because of this condition here. So hold on for a second. So what I will do after this is I will check if this is the case. So if the item is equal to space, then what I will do is I will set found to yes, so that I can exit this loop. So set found to yes, and I will also replace that particular item. So you can say replace item C of lane -1 with an O, and O just stands for occupied, and you can use any other letter at this point. So once we're out of this, this is going to be pretty much all that we will need with regard to defining lane 1 as the lane. We also need to make sure that the obstacle goes to the particular layer that we want to go to. And I just realized I made another mistake, and that is running without screen refresh. And you need to make sure you do not run without screen refresh, because here we're going to be changing layers, and we do not want that to happen instantly. We want the layer to actually change one by one. So we can get back to the code here. And to change the layer, there isn't a go to X layer or something like that which we can use. So what we can do instead is say go to the front layer first, and then we can go backwards by a certain number of layers. And you can head over to operators, grab a plus, and you can see 1 plus C layers. Okay, and the reason I'm not just having C layers is because the second lane is also vacant, and not the second lane, the second layer is also vacant, and the second layer is vacant for the player to come if he's at lane -1, or if you look at the player, that's going to be lane 1 for the player, but that's lane -1 if we look at it from the obstacle point of view. So we'll go back this many layers, and things are going to be pretty similar for the others. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out very quickly and drag these other blocks of code down here, and if the lane is 1, then I will duplicate all of this, and let me zoom in once again. So I will drag and drop this here, and I have a little bit of lag in my system, so I do ask you to be patient with that. And there we go, so we are back. So in this case, I will have this exact same thing, but I will switch this to lane 1 and also this to be lane 1. And in case the lane 1 is where the car is, we need to go it right. We need to make sure it goes right at the back. And to do this, we can instead just say lane 14 plus C, because 14 is where the player is going to be, and not lane, it's layer. And I guess my tongue is pretty twisted over these two words. So we can duplicate this once again here. And all of this is going to be the same, but we'll be having this as lane 0. We'll be replacing the item of lane 0, and we will be going to 8 plus C layers. And this is going to be the entire basis for our obstacle. And we also need to make sure that the lanes are cleared up when we're deleting the clone, because otherwise the lanes are going to get saturated and filled up very quickly. So what I will do is I'll make another block called a delete clone. And this is all the stuff that we need to do before we delete that particular clone. So you can drag it right at the bottom here. And we'll have 3 different conditions. So we will first see if lane is equal to 1. So check if lane is equal to 1. In this case, you have to remember that C is a local variable. Hence, each clone has a particular C which defines its position in that particular list. Okay. So if lane is equal to 1, then what I will do is I will head over to the list part of our variables category, and I will say delete, not delete actually, I'll say replace item C of lane 1. So this corresponding lane with a space. So I'm going to just change it back to what it was initially before that clone was created. You can duplicate this once more and change this to be 0. And in this case, I will change lane 0's item to space. And finally, if the lane is -1, then I will change the item of lane -1 with a space. Alright, so now we can get into the part where we deleted the clone within the clone update. And right before we delete the clone, we can just call in this function. And I'm going to quickly correct another mistake which I just realized that I made, and that is within the layering. So I would go back not 14 but 13 layers, and the mistake I made was I would go to the 14th plus C layer, but I wouldn't go to the 14th, I wouldn't go backward by 14 plus C layers. So since we're already at lane 1, we need to make sure that we add in that subtraction within the go backward. So very simple, just correct that to 7 here and 13 here. And now we can get into the player, and this is where we need to make sure that the player also goes to the correct lane, because if the player doesn't go to the correct lane, then while we're moving around, there's going to be pretty much no impact. And while the obstacles would be aligned properly, our player would be very, very, very messed up. So now we can make a new block called go to correct layer. So go to correct layer like this, and we can click OK. We can drag this right here, and we can call that block right before we move to the particular position. Okay. And within this, we just need to go to a particular layer based on our nearest lane. And I don't think I have my nearest lane set up just as yet, so I will do that in a second. But first we can head over to looks and say go to the front layer. So go to front layer, and based on the nearest lane, we can do certain things. So I will quickly create that particular variable like this. Now we can set it for this sprite only because we wouldn't want the obstacles having this variable, for example. And now we can just have 3 if-thens, okay? So if then, and if then. So the first case is if the nearest lane is equal to 1. And remember, here things are going to be the exact opposite of where what the lanes were in the obstacles. So we have to be a little bit careful. So if the nearest, okay, I called it nearest player by mistake instead of the nearest lane, my bad. All right, there we go. So if nearest lane is equal to 1, then it means you can basically consider that the player is on lane 1, which is this. For the obstacles, it would be the extreme left lane, but for the player, it's the extreme right lane. In this case, he is right at the front. So all we have to do is say go back. So go backwards 1 layer, and that would be pretty much it. So now if the nearest lane is equal to 0, then we need to go back not 1 layer, but we need to go back 7 different layers. So basically we are at the 8th layer now. And finally, if the nearest lane is equal to a 1, or not 1, -1, then we need to go right at the back, which is going to be the 14th layer. So we go back 13th layer in addition to the front layer. So I will quickly zoom in so that you can see the code better. And now we need to make sure that the nearest lane is always set up properly. And it's going to be just one line of code. It's very simple. So we can set nearest lane here to be round off. So you can just grab a round from the operators category and you can say round off lane animation. And this is going to be it. Very simple, but it's going to work out perfectly. So now I'm going to hit the run key. And there you go, everything is set up perfectly and you can see that the cars are aligned and also the player is pretty perfectly set up. We obviously can go through cars right now, so that is a drawback, but that we will change in the next video. And you can see that the cars, when they are in the next lane, they go right in front of the player and you don't see the player going in front of the car. I do hope you understand what I'm saying, but basically my point is that the player lines up perfectly with the cars and the cars also line up perfectly within themselves, and as a result our layering is set up perfectly. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.